Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay. We're just going to wait a few more minutes and then see if some other people join us, okay?
Hey, while we're waiting, did anybody hear anything good this morning? Or have you been able to attend anything else? I imagine it's a little more stressful on the students who are probably making last minute edits. But
I haven't been able to see anything yet. I did have work this morning, but I do know a few of my fellow classmates have done recorded presentations, so I'm definitely excited to see those.
yeah, it's been really good so far. So kudos to NRHC for pulling off the online conference.
Yeah.
Also to the moderator, I might be popping out at some point to just check in on another student, and then I'll come back in if that's okay.
That's not a problem for you guys too. I'm going to get on the phone once you guys start your presentations, and I'm going to order a pizza for our vice president, who's a conference co-chair. He's been working his butt off all day today, and I don't think he's had a chance for lunch. So I'm going to order a pizza and have it delivered to him. So, yeah. Okay, so actually, this was his session, and he just asked me to make sure it got opened up for you guys. And I just found the session on the program. So it is just the two of you guys presenting, and got someone else coming in. That's great. So both presenters are here. We'll follow the order that's in the program. If you want like 20 to 25 minutes to present, that's fine. Since we only have two presentations, we can do some questions afterwards. And Makenna, would you like to start us off?
Yes. Am I able to share my screen, right?
You should be able to, yep.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm Mike Tasto from Southern New Hampshire University. I'm the treasurer for the NRHC.
It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's my dog. Okay. So you can see this okay? Okay, good. So I'm actually really happy to be in this presentation with Shannon, because I feel like the things that I'll be talking about, she's going to help to give her own personal experience towards a little bit. And I think that's really good for this presentation, for me and for her as well. Let me close this because I feel like it's in the way. Okay. So my big question was, how do you accommodate distance learning for students with ADHD, especially during this time where things are just so different? It's a big question. No one really knows how to help students. So I figured it would be good to do roundtable like this, because the best way to get things out is just to talk about it, get different points of view, different opinions. So I think that is going to be the best way for this presentation. That's why I chose it. And I'm going to start by talking about ADHD in general, just so that we have a background and we can understand what it is. Sorry. All right. So what is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? ADHD, as I will refer to it in this presentation. So it is a neurodevelopmental disorder, but I don't really like to call it a disorder because it's really just an addition to someone's life and how they learn and how they act. But it is actually one of the most common mental disorders affecting children currently. So I think that's important because if we're all virtual learning right now, a lot of teachers are probably, and students are probably dealing with a problem of how do you accommodate, how do you help them learn? So some of the symptoms that go with ADHD are daydreaming, looking around, not really paying attention, squirming or fidgeting, having trouble sitting in your seat, things like that. Excessive talking, which is an important thing, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Making careless mistakes, and there's a lot more. And I noted here that not all symptoms mean a child has ADHD. Sometimes students are just being kids and, maybe they're daydreaming or they're not able to sit still. It just depends on the circumstances and if it's consistent across settings. So that's something important too, but I talk about that a little bit more. So with the symptoms of ADHD, there's different types. So there's technically 2, but they can also be put together in the combined. So inattentive is when students are making those careless mistakes. They're just not paying attention. They're going so fast. This is where you'll see the students that are unfocused and they're having trouble staying organized and they can get easily distracted. So that's the inattentive one. And people don't really see that as much. That's not what they think when they hear ADHD. They usually think of the hyperactive. So with the talking too much, maybe student is blurting out in class. They can't wait their turn. They can't wait for this teacher to call on them. They're impatient. And this is also where the fidgeting and squirming comes in. So hyperactive and impulsive, that is what people generally think ADHD is. But students can be inattentive and make those careless mistakes, or they can be combined, which is they have tendencies of both. So I just wanted to ask a true or false question real quick for everyone. So the first question I wanted to ask, and just give a thumbs up if you think it's true and a thumbs down if you think it's false. So the number of children who have been diagnosed with ADHD has increased over the past few years. So thumbs up for true or thumbs down for false. Yeah, that's true. So it has increased. It has increased a lot over the past few years, just with more knowledge of what ADHD is and the symptoms that we're looking for. And then the second question is, just because a child may have short attention span, inability to stick to one task, be energetic, etc., that does not necessarily mean that they have ADHD. So true or false?
Just really quick, there's a thumbs down button.
Oh, is there? I'm not sure. I think there's only thumbs up on Zoom. So this one is actually true though. Just because a student may be acting as if they have ADHD, they could just be being a kid. Sometimes kids have shorter attention spans. They can't focus on a task as much. They may be a little bit energetic and unable to sit in their seat at times. So one of the first things that's suspected when a child's behavior in class or performance on schoolwork is problematic, they just assume that it's ADHD. They don't think about if it's other things going on in the child's life. Maybe that child is having issues at home. Maybe something's going on with a relative that you don't know about. Maybe they're having trouble making friends. It's just one of those things that people just assume right away without digging deeper. So that's where it's important for teachers and parents to look at the symptoms and signs. So most young children actually exhibit or appear to show signs every now and then. Like I said, with the excessive talking, a lot of people, this is kind of the opposite, but a lot of people just think that young girls with ADHD are just, oh, they're just being girls. They're just talking a lot, but they really do have ADHD. So that's one thing that I want to talk about, because it's very interesting when people just assume or don't assume something. So I think it's important in that case for teachers and parents to be aware of what ADHD looks like in the classroom, because if they can identify that and it goes across settings, then you know that that child may have ADHD. So in the regular classroom, the student may make careless mistakes in their schoolwork. You know, they're not as focused there. That's where the inattentive comes in. They may have difficulty following directions. They also could have an unorganized desk or cubby. That one's kind of tricky because a lot of students have unorganized desks and cubbies, but that is one of the ways it could appear in a classroom. The student can lose homework, assignments, books, worksheets, anything that you're working on, projects. That also goes with being unorganized. So the student may be impatient and has trouble waiting their turn. They may just call out the answer right away instead of waiting for the teacher to call on them if they're raising their hand. And naturally, they could have trouble staying in their seat, which is what a lot of people think is the first thing or the first sign of a student having ADHD. So that one's tricky because sometimes a student is just bored, especially during COVID. In a hybrid classroom, the students can't move from their seat, so they could get a little restless. So that's why it's tricky during online learning right now. But we will talk about that a little bit more. So when these behaviors present themselves in a regular classroom, the teacher can notice it and adjust for those students' learning needs. So the next thing I want to talk about was distance learning, because this is an important role in my presentation today. So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. So as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic started about a year ago, a little bit over a year now. And since then, we have had a huge shift in how the world is working and how we are functioning as humans, and especially how education is playing out and how students are learning and teachers are teaching. So now that school is essentially from home for some students, students now have to be self-guided in their learning. They have to find motivations for themselves in order to learn. It's not coming from the teacher always. They have to be able to manage their time and schedule in order to complete their schoolwork if the teacher doesn't necessarily give them one. It depends on the school situation, really, because every school is doing something different. They have to adjust to a new learning type. So they were all used to being in regular school with their peers and their teachers, and now they have to learn virtually, hybrid, or in person. And I'm student teacher right now, and I've actually student taught in all three of these. I've student taught completely virtual, completely hybrid, and then completely in person. So I can understand the struggle of the students from last year going to have all virtual classes. And now this year, they've just changed in the middle of the school year and students just have to adapt. But at the same time, with all those changes, students are expected to perform at the same levels as regular school year. In Pennsylvania right now, I'm not sure if anyone knows, but the Pennsylvania state exams, the PSSAs, they are unsure when the students should take them this year. They don't know if they're allowing them to take it either the end of this year in May, or they're talking about letting them take it in September of next school year. So there's a lot that students are expected to still learn while so many changes are happening. So this is just a question that I wanted for everyone to keep in mind during the rest of the presentation, but how do you think distance learning, from what I just talked about, would affect a student with ADHD who is now learning at home or learning in hybrid or virtual or completely in person and having to change to all this? So that's something that we'll talk about at the end of my presentation a little bit when we open it up. So from my research, I actually found a couple of positives for students with ADHD in a virtual classroom. So there is this online learning academy called SOAR. And in SOAR, they have camps and they have classes that's all virtual for students with ADHD. So I think that's really interesting because they've been doing this since at least 2016. That's when I read their article was from. So they've been doing it for at least 4 years. So they have a little jump on the schools now. So what they found was that there's actually less distractions when they learn from home than when they learn in a school environment. You know, they don't have to worry about, oh, what are all my 20 classmates doing? What's my teacher doing? What's all this art on the wall? Ooh, look, I have erasers in my desk. So there's less distractions because they're just by themselves or at their home. And also they're able to work at their own pace. So if they need things faster or slower or in a different way than the teacher would, they have that time to work at their own pace. In some cases, some teachers give schedules, but for the most part, it's pretty lenient. The student also gets more one-on-one instruction if needed, because when things are virtual, the student is able to request one-on-one time with the teacher that they normally wouldn't be able to get. And it also promotes a new learning environment. So it changes it up a little bit and gives a new scenery, which may help them focus a little bit. So with all the positives, there are some negatives to online learning. So for example, there may not be enough structure. So if the school doesn't set maybe a schedule, maybe that student, instead of that being beneficial for them, that actually hurts their academic career a little bit. They struggle creating schedule. Another big thing of ADHD is time management and not being as well organized. So that could be where they struggle there if a parent doesn't help them. Another negative is that they have limited social time, and that's with everyone with the pandemic, as we're all staying home and socially distanced. So they don't get to spend as much time with their peers. They don't get that brain break from work to just be with friends. Another interesting thing that I didn't originally think about was a parent being both a teacher and a parent, because the relationship between a student and a parent is very different from a teacher and a parent. So when the parent has to play both roles, it can get a little bit confusing for that student. So the Children and Adults with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or CHADD organization, has some recommendations for students in online learning. Sorry. Okay. So they suggest creating structure in routines, which I think is great. And that comes from either the student and the parents working together or the teacher creating the schedule. You need to keep the student engaged in learning. So that is a tough one because they're online. So that kind of comes down to the teacher to create interactive lessons where students can be engaged and feel like they're learning on their computer, which is tough. I think this next one is important. Setting up a home learning environment. I think this will help not only with the issue of the parent-teacher confusion role, it will help the student as well. So just making a space that's just for school, and the only thing that student does in that space is school, so that they have a school setting and then they have a home setting. I think that's important, and I like that they added that. Helping the child stay connected with peers. This is important because with any student, not just students with ADHD, but socialization is very important. And I think that helping them stay connected with peers, not just in school, but maybe have like a little play day on Zoom or something like that. Also, they recommend keeping the child active and healthy. So making sure they still get 3 meals a day, 4 snacks, the healthy meals, as well as keeping them active. So giving them a recess and time to play and run around. So then these are the questions that I wanted to ask as a way for us to kind of open it up to see what other people are thinking and get their opinions. So this is just my way to like open the discussion a bit. So what I was thinking while creating this was, do students with ADHD struggle with distance learning? Does distance learning actually benefit them more than we know? How should teachers accommodate distance learning for students with ADHD? What can schools do to better assist teachers in accommodating virtual learners with ADHD? Because I feel like a big part of it is also the school helping out. What are the best ways to help a struggling student with ADHD succeed in virtual learning, which is kind of, we talked about that a little bit. And then what resources can or should be provided to students and teachers to make virtual learning successful for students with ADHD? So this is where if anyone wants to answer, has an opinion, I think it's good, especially with school things, to talk about it. So you can unmute.
Hello. I'm from Westfield State. I just was going to say that, sorry, I'm not unmuting my video, but I was going to say that also, I think important to also comment as a homeschooling mother who's also working is that there's the other thing that we have to, and I was also a teacher for I'm a professor, but I was also a teacher. And I just think we should also acknowledge the expertise that teachers bring to this. So like
Right.
you could be the best intentioned parent, but if you're not trained in how to work with these particular students, and this is just ADHD, it could be any student.
Right.
That's another like huge thing that like should be on that list, is idea of like the expertise to even work with that student. I saw in like New York Times or something, a mother had like literally like she makes her kids call her Mrs. So-and-so during the school day, and she has like bells and everything to like make this like differential, but at the same time she was also like, I'm not a teacher, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I think that's important. You can only ask for the best from parents because this is tough on them too, especially if they're trying to work their job from home as well. Then that could add another distraction for a student. So these are just things that I wanted us to think about if anybody wanted to ask another question or think something. I feel like Shannon is going to add a lot to what I already said because she can talk from her own experiences, and I think that's really great. Dr. Schlegel?
I'm kind of wondering about, some of the nitty gritty aspects, like to mute, to not mute, to show video, not show video, because the whole blurting out and just wanting to speak, if you're on mute, you can live that urge, you can allow that, you can express it, but if you're on mute, then it's not disruptive in the classroom. But of course, visually, others could see if somebody was speaking. And then of course, there's so many ethical issues about muting, not muting, and having video on and not having video on. But I'm seeing that there could be pros and cons with just a little bit of to mute or not to mute, and I'll mute.
Mm-hmm. And that's with a lot of students, not just students with ADHD, I think, especially with younger kids who don't understand how to work the computer yet. So that is a very important thing. Just the little details of being online and in school at the same time.
Nice job, Makenna. So I've been substitute teaching in this district to help keep the schools open. And I've got my son behind me right now has gone remote all year. And my daughter's been face-to-face in the middle school. And so I've busted him a couple times being on Discord or some of the playing video games while he's supposed to be in school, so that the teachers can't see his screen. Mm-hmm. And while I was face-to-face substitute teaching in the school, I saw some students with their fingers playing the keyboard, and I'd get up, walk around, and all of a sudden their screen switched, right? And then I sit back down at the desk, and then I see the key, moving around on the keyboard again. And so, with all these computers sitting at desks right now, it's opening up an opportunity for people to, get distracted really easily. And so I'm curious if that is affecting ADHD students even more so, because they have this ability there now. But nice job on your presentation.
Thank you. These are the resources I used as well. Sorry, I don't know if you can see them. All right. Thank you for listening and being attentive during my presentation. I was a little nervous.
All right, Shannon, go ahead.
I'm really excited that I get to go after Makenna because I felt like that was such a great transition. So we just saw how important and like how prevalent these problems are. And then we get to transition to see why it's so important that we give our students opportunities to become their own advocates. It's a little bit difficult as they're younger, but from, I believe, middle school on, students are able to become their own advocates as they get older, more so. But I'm going to talk about an honors English course that I took my freshman year, it was second semester. And what came out of it and what I learned from it. And I think a lot of other professors can learn from it. So basically, the structure of the class was that we as students chose a broad topic. Could have been anything. So we chose as a group to talk about mental health. And from there, we were able to do anything we wanted, any sort of like platform format for our final project. And so for me, I chose ADHD as something that I've had my whole life. Was diagnosed with it around first grade, which is super early, and especially in females. It presents differently, like Makenna said, and it's usually caught much later in girls than it is in boys. But thankfully, I had great parents who caught it, and so it's been a big part of my life. So I chose to talk about it, and what I did was I wrote an open letter titled "What I Wish You Knew About ADHD," and so I will pull this up. Here we go. So. It's a little lengthy, it's 5 pages, but what I did was I addressed it to parents, peers, and educators. And so the whole point of what I want is, because my whole life you see those things and it's like ADHD are the kids who run around, the kids who don't stop talking, and the bad kids in class. And that was it. And I was sitting there and I was like, academically, I've been so great my whole life. And like, yeah, I'm fidgety, but I don't run around the classroom. And I was like, I wish people could know these things, that like, it's different in everyone, just like any other emotional, behavioral, physical disability, disorder, whatever you want to call it. There's no cookie cutter, and everyone experiences it differently. And some people have all the symptoms, some people have 2, and it's all valid. But what from 20 years of living with this, wanted people to know. And so what I did for parents, I talked about stigma, and that it starts with them. Talking to your children is important, telling them that they shouldn't be ashamed. And what I felt in this letter is I didn't want it to be, you don't know this and you don't know that and you're doing this wrong and this and that. And I wanted it to have a positive part too, so that whenever I said, please no, I talked about what they were doing right. All right, to end it with, know that you're not alone, because it is difficult for parents. I mean, you see the kids in the grocery stores and the parents who would just look exhausted. It's not just a student thing. It's not just affecting one child, it's affecting everyone around them. So I talked about for parents, knowing about comorbidities, that's important. The simultaneous presence of 2 chronic diseases or conditions. ADHD, unfortunately, has a high rate of comorbidities in anything really: depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. And that's something that I felt was overlooked. I mean, until really researching in this class, I didn't really know about comorbidities, and which is crazy to think about because I have ADHD. So this class helped me to learn more about myself, as well as what I have. We talked about medication, and how a lot of times it seems like that's the only like way to go. It's medication or it's nothing. And I wanted to talk about how it's not black and white, just like the symptoms, just like how it's treated. Yes, you can take medication. You don't have to. You can go to therapy. It's all different and it works differently for everyone. To talk about peers, this was something that was also big with me, because you sit around in your classroom and your peers are looking at you a little funny because you're the kid who's always crumpling paper, you're always doodling, you're always kind of moving around in your seat. And a lot of times you're told, like, don't ask questions, don't be rude, don't be nosy. but it's important that they know too. So talking about things that like we may not feel are offensive or rude could be. So things like, oh, I'm feeling so ADHD today may not seem like a big deal to some people, but for others, it's not just a fleeting moment. It's not just a, oh, today I woke up and I'm feeling a little. It's every day. Talking about assumptions. It's another thing that I talked about in class, and like we all learned together about all of these things. Like, you don't assume. And my professor would say, when anyone said anything that was a little presumptuous, a little ignorant, we would go, ooh, ouch, educate. And what we would do is we would stop and we would take time to talk about why what we said wasn't correct, why what we said could have been seen as offensive, and then educating. What is the truth behind it? How do we approach this? And so I felt like that approach in a classroom was something that I had never seen before. It was very open. There was no stigma on anything. The whole point was to talk about the things that we didn't like to talk about and made you uncomfortable. So saying things like, a big personal thing is, did you take your meds today? Something that like, oh, you might just think like, oh, they're a little, but everyone has a bad day. Kids with ADHD are allowed to have a bad day, whether they take their medication or not. And if they don't take their medication, that's something for maybe a parent to address. But other than that, we're all allowed to have bad days, and it may just present differently. Again, talking about how it's all different. But again, ending this section with, it's okay not to know everything, and we appreciate your patience. And then my big part was educators. So something, obviously, been going to school my whole life, and I've had ADHD my whole life. And so talking about it, like, I've been thankful and lucky enough to have parents that advocated for me when I couldn't. And so IEPs are important, and making sure that teachers follow IEPs are also important. I know a lot of these things are tedious, and a lot of it seems like just a write-off. I didn't know until I was older that I had an IEP, that my mom could sign my homework if I couldn't get through it that night, and my teacher would have to accept it as completed. And thankfully, my parents did push me to do these things, and we never utilized that, but it's a valid point. And if it's in an IEP, it's there for a reason. Very rarely is anyone going to tolerate just laziness in the education system coming from a student. So IEPs are important because not every student learns the same, which in general, you should never teach a cookie cutter way, but kids with ADHD especially struggle with this. A big thing that I, as a young student, utilized was, you see the messenger students. So if little Jimmy is getting a little antsy in class, giving him a task. And if it's not too disruptive, sending him to the office to deliver a paper is something that a lot of teachers utilize. So giving him an envelope with nothing in it, sending him to the secretary that you have an agreement with. Jimmy gets out of the classroom, he walks around, he comes back, he's ready to go. He's focused, he had a task, he walked it out, he's back, he's ready to go. Also, the symptoms of ADHD in an education setting can be disruptive, and that's a fact. There's no denying that a child squirming around isn't going to be distracting to both you and their peers. Again, delivery jobs, and talking about how a child with ADHD is not a hindrance in your classroom. In fact, they can be a blessing. Children with ADHD see things differently. We all see things differently, and utilizing that, capitalizing on their different perspective from things can help you enrich your classroom. You can get into an in-depth discussion about things that you never thought you would in a classroom. And that while a child may not have their eyes on you, that does not mean they're not paying attention. That was a huge thing for me as a kid, was that I can hear you and I may not be seeing you, but I'm doodling because I can hear you, and that's how I process. A lot of times kids, they have a difference between fine motor skills and gross motor skills. For me personally, as a student, it was fine motor. I wasn't getting out of my seat, but my fingers do not stop moving. I am doodling, I am ripping up a piece of paper, I'm playing with an eraser, but I know what's going on. And a lot of times, and even I think it too, you'll see I'll work with a kid and be like, you're not looking at me, you're not listening to me. Sometimes they are. Sometimes looking at something is even more distracting because there's so many movements, there's so many sounds. So to control, a lot of students won't look. A lot of students will be fidgeting, but they're still there. They're still in classroom. But a thing that I found to be most helpful, and through this class I realized had helped me the most, was to touch base with your students. If you know that a student has ADHD, talk to them. And this isn't just elementary school, in college too. Those first week, that syllabus week where, oh, tell me about yourself. And you're like, oh, they want to know what I did this summer. I always make sure I put in, I have ADHD. And a lot of times my professors will talk to me about it. And they'll ask me, okay, what does this entail? What does this mean to you? And touching base, asking, what do you need and what can we do, is a huge help. Asking a student, any student, whether or not they have ADHD, how they can be successful in your own classroom is huge. Working with your students, especially students with ADHD, will help you and them. You'll be able to understand why maybe a paper isn't being done. And this student will understand that they can go to you. Because as a student and as a student with ADHD, my biggest fear was asking for help, admitting I needed help, and then sitting there and saying, I have this thing that makes me a little bit different from other students. And that's a huge part of stigma. And talking about it in this class made me feel a lot better, because the way that we did this was we did peer reviewing. So the night before our class, we would send it out to all of our classmates. They would read it, they would look at it, whatever format it was in, and then the next day we would go in. And 5 kids would be what we would list what they really liked. 5 would talk about what they think could be changed. And then 5 kids would talk about like what they thought was really interesting and what they wanted to see from it. And when I turned mine in the next day of class, I was so nervous, but I knew that this was going to help me. And to hear what my classmates had to say about it, to see even in their eyes, like learning from my own experiences, and I was learning from them too. So it was really helpful to have a classroom setting where we talked about mental health. We were able to pick a topic within it, and we were able to talk to our classmates about what we needed, what we could improve upon. And then the biggest part and the biggest takeaway from this class was that I became my own advocate. So what I did is, after I cleaned this paper up, put all the final touches, I actually sent it to my doctor who diagnosed me when I was a kid. We're family friends, you know, you get to know these people. And I was like, you know, might as well just show her, you know, what I've kind of learned from this. And she did reach out to me and asked if she could use it in her practice. And she said, she goes, this is great. And I would like to use it. I would like to give it to parents and the kids that I'm diagnosing. And I took a step back and I was like, oh my God. To be able to use everything that I've gone through, and it hasn't necessarily been a walk in the park. It hasn't been all sunshine and butterflies, but it's all worth it. And to learn from that and to have my doctor tell me that, you know, this could help other people, that was huge. And then I sent it to my aunt, who is a principal in a town, and she sent it to her teachers so that they could read the portion. And I was talking about it with my coach, who asked me to send it to him so he could send it to his daughter because his granddaughter has ADHD. And in that moment, I realized that this class not only gave me a platform amongst my peers, but it gave me the ability to open the door for these discussions, for these realizations that, you know, sometimes you don't understand, you don't know. We don't all know these things, and you don't know until you're told. And this classroom and this process gave me the ability to open this up, open up the conversation, start it, you know, teach people in a way that isn't in your face. It's just very relaxed. And the process for me was also therapeutic. I mean, I learned more about myself, and I was able to reflect in a healthy, safe environment. And for that, and for this honors program and this honors class, I will forever be grateful for it. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions or any comments.
Great job, Shannon. That was really interesting. And while you're speaking, actually reading through there, I was kind of thinking about this as something that you publish. You know, what we do is we do research and we publish our research so other people can see it and learn from it. And you know, when you just ended at the end with the stories of how it's impacted so many other people already, it would be great. I mean, I don't know what your plans are with taking this forward, but I kind of just see it as something that should be out there for more people to see. So very nice job. It's a great idea too.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience that was like healthy, and everything was very supportive. And it was super exciting too. I was like, oh my God, we get to write about something that we want, and to sit in this class, and they were like, all right, pick a topic. And we were like, whoa, what? And then to pick mental health out of all things, we were like, this is incredible. I mean, my classmates, we talked about police suicide and police brutality, and we talked about suicide and depression. And to talk in an educational setting like this, and it to be, you know, like kind of supported, was incredible. And it was such a great experience, and it was so fun. I mean, I remember I called my mom and I was like, Mom, guess what I'm gonna get to write about for grade in college. So to have that, and it was because it was an honors class, it was a smaller class, and it was a very intimate setting. And I mean, I'm best friends with some of those people in the class now. I mean, we all got to sit there and we would look at each other and we would tell each other, I really liked your paper about this, and I really found this interesting. And it was such a great experience, and it'll be something that I always remember.
Hey there, Shannon and Makenna. I wanted to thank you both for your great presentations, and they really made such a good pair. That doesn't always happen in conferences when the organizers are really trying hard to make thematic clusters, but in your case, it was really such a good pairing. And what I felt like you both had in common was this real sort of passionate engagement with your topic. And of course, for those of us who are teachers, we love to hear, what you're saying, Shannon, about a moment when, your learning feels like doing this research wasn't about checking some assignment box to get the class done, but that you chose a topic that you care about, that's relevant to your own personal experience, to your professional future, to the people you care about in your life. And then to use these academic tools of research and writing and, different forms of communication to share it out in these ways that make a real impact. How are we going to support younger kids with ADHD as they're trying to learn, especially remote now? And how do we, give folks with ADHD the tools to self-advocate, like you're saying, Shannon? And so, mostly I just wanted to say words of praise to you both. And also you've made me reflect on, why do I like NRHC so much, right? And it's whatever, I was at panels that were more, anyway, really different topics this morning, but what all of the student presenters had in common with both of you was the personal relevance and timeliness. And again, this isn't about sort of empty academic exercise, just let me show off how I can do research and write about it, but this topic matters to me and to the world in this way, and here's why. And let me show, and so that's just, when you're fired up, your audience gets fired up too. So I just wanted to say that that's really fun to be an audience member for. And I also wanted to thank you, Shannon, for the teaching tool of oops, ouch, educate. I'll steal that one, and we need it, right? And these days more than ever, when we're all sort of on eggshells, the way that we are struggling to speak across our differences and, political divisions and all the rest of it, there is that kind of minefield feeling to the classroom, especially when we're having hard conversations, like you were saying, Shannon, like, so I want to learn more. I think I'm ignorant about this topic. I'm scared to ask because I might hurt someone's feelings. So by putting that tool out there as a ground rule to help folks feel like they can take a little bit more of a risk and ask what they really want to ask to try to learn more, feels like a takeaway that I'll be thankful for.
Yeah, it was definitely something where I went into class every day and I was like, I know that if I don't know something,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be judged here. And because we also had a diverse population within the classroom, we knew obviously we also emphasized that you can't make someone be an advocate. You can't make them say anything that they don't want to. And just because there's a topic about race and there's a person in your classroom who is of color, that doesn't mean that they're going to tell you. That doesn't mean that they have to educate you, but that if they choose to. And it was such a great experience to go in and be like, all right, I know I'm going to learn, and I know I'm not going to walk away feeling like I'm a jerk or I'm an idiot. They're going to tell me if what I'm saying is wrong.
Nice. So I guess I'll just mute myself after I ask a question for both of you, but I just, kind of picking up at the concluding part of Makenna's presentation around, ADHD as it intersects with remote learning, whether we're talking about elementary age kids or the middle schoolers or college age students. And I guess I just wondered for both of you, how's it been for you as students? And also, what are you hearing from your peers? If any of your peers themselves, have shared with you that they also have ADHD or not, I'm just kind of wondering about some of those learning struggles or challenges that Makenna was detailing. And I'm just curious kind of how it's been going for you and your peers.
Personally, like Makenna said, I do struggle with structure. And so this has been difficult, and it's been difficult because some professors aren't great at communication. So reaching out to them, it's a little hard on my end to start that. And then when you don't hear back, it's a little discouraging, but it's also kind of nice to know that my peers are in the same boat as me. I'm not alone in this. But it has been difficult, but there are some saving graces where, I'm able to get out after one class and just kind of relax in my own room and decompress and then go into another class. But it has been difficult, and it has had its ups and its downs.
Right, and I'm actually student teaching now. So like I said, I've been working with a lot of students, and it's so interesting just to see the different things that they like to do at home, and they're not even shy about showing it in their camera. I was teaching a lesson, this one kid just got up, picked up a basketball, and then was just like playing in this playroom. I was like, oh my gosh. So that's kind of why I didn't really know what to do. I was like, okay. In those situations, I just ignore it. But I think it's important because no one really knows what to do. We're kind of just going day at a time and, getting vaccinated and hoping that it ends soon and trying our best. But even at the college level, some of my peers who I know have expressed me that, they are struggling as well. They'll be like, yeah, I haven't gotten out of bed since 2, class at 2:30, and the schedule is so gone. So I think it is important just to provide students, especially with ADHD, just that structure, just to help them, give them a daily schedule, and things like that can definitely improve. But I really did also like your oops, ouch, educate, because sometimes, like I said, when in my student teaching experience, kids would say things and I just would not say anything. But I think it's a great opportunity to use that in my career to open up a conversation about things and how they can be interpreted and how to be polite about our opinions and values that way. So it was very interesting to hear what you had to say, and I can take both sides from, a peer and a student and an educator. And I think that was helpful to me too.
No, I loved your presentation. I was like, this is so good. It was such it touched on all the good points too. And it really did. It wasn't just like, here's what you already know. Here's what it is. And here's what you probably don't know. And just to watch it. It was so much fun to watch. And I was like, oh, I love that. I'm like, oh, that's me. But yeah, I mean, that's just something I wish we could start every school year off, every teacher has to sit down one day and just learn about it.
Right.
Because it's so, there's just the little things, and it's just everything else. So you have these symptoms, but not these, but it's still this, or maybe it's not. And it's just so nuanced, but it's so important too.
Right. When I saw your presentation title and everything with mine, knowing mine already, I was like, wow, this is going to flow so well. Because I was like, mine's kind of just like an overview, and then yours is your personal experience. So I'm glad that they fit so well. I don't know how that happened, but it was.
I was so excited. I was like, no way. I was like, this is going to be so cool. I was like, that's what are the chances?
Right.
And then I was like, oh, we're going to have so much fun with this. I was like, it's just going to be we're here. We're going to tell you.
Yeah, kudos to.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys. So what we do is with all the submissions, we start grouping them together on similarities of topics. And right now there's another session going on in how IEPs and general education integration impacts students with HFASD. I think that's high functioning. I don't know what the ASD means, but
ASD.
Autism spectrum disorder.
Oh, okay. Okay. High functioning. Okay. So there's a lot of great sessions going on. We've got 25 minutes left. Do you guys want to hop off and then try joining into a different session? Let's see if we can. Okay.
Yes, I'm have 4 people. So great job to both of you, Shannon and Makenna. Well done.
Yeah.
See
Nice
you
job,
in
guys.
another panel.
Thank you, guys. Good job.
Thank you so much
All
for
right.
having
Enjoy
us.
the rest of the conference.
You too.
All
It
right.
was
Bye-bye.
nice meeting you.
Bye.